Imagine this. You're screaming at your kid because they spilled orange juice on the floor. Again. But let's be real. It's not about the juice, is it? No, you're actually yelling at your 4-year-old self who also felt small, helpless, and constantly in trouble. And now you're dumping your unresolved childhood garbage onto a kid who just wanted breakfast. Congratulations, you've officially become the parent you swore you'd never be. But don't worry, you're not special. Most of parents are guilty, and if you're sitting there thinking, no, not me, I'm a good parent, stop lying to yourself. That's exactly why you need this book. The book we're breaking down today is The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read and Your Children Will Be Glad That You Did, by Philippa Perry. Now, Philippa isn't some random parenting life hack blogger. She's a seasoned psychotherapist with over 20 years of experience, a contributor to BBC documentaries, and, yes, the wife of British artist Grayson Perry. But don't let that soften the punch. Perry doesn't hand you 10 quick tricks for obedient kids. She's not giving you Pinterest parenting hacks. This book is about something way more uncomfortable. You. Here's the reality check Perry smacks us with. Your relationship with your child is only as healthy as your relationship with yourself. The tantrums, the whining, the lying, all those things your kid does that drive you insane, they're not just their problem. They're a mirror reflecting back your unresolved crap. Now, before we go further, let me say this clearly. This video falls under the Fair Use Act. We're here for educational purposes only. The book is Philippa Perry's, but this breakdown, that's mine. I'm not here to recite chapters like an audiobook. I'm here to call out your BS, add fresh perspective, and maybe piss you off just enough that you'll actually change something. Because here's the truth. Most of you don't need parenting hacks. You need a therapist. And short of that, this book is the slap in the face you've been avoiding. So buckle up, because in the next chapters, we're going to rip apart some of the most common lies you tell yourself as a parent. Lies like, I turned out fine, or kids are resilient, or my personal favorite, I'm nothing like my parents. Spoiler, you are. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. Ghosts in the nursery. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your kids are not just inheriting your DNA, they're inheriting your unfinished business. Every insecurity you shoved under the rug, every wound you told yourself you got over, every fight you never resolved with your parents, it all leaks out. You think you're yelling at your kid for being messy, lazy, or disrespectful, but most of the time, you're yelling at your own reflection, at the child you used to be. And guess what? That child didn't disappear just because you grew up. It's still in there, throwing tantrums in your subconscious. Philippa Perry puts it bluntly. Kids don't copy what we say, they copy what we do. You can tell them to use their words all day long, but if you slam doors, shut down, or explode in rage when you're frustrated, they'll do exactly that. And when they do, it'll piss you off, because it's like watching a rerun of your worst self. That's why so many parents say, I opened my mouth and my mother's words came out. Translation, you've become the ghost of your own parents. And the joke is on you, because the same crap you hated is exactly what you're now handing to your kid on a silver platter. The real kicker is that most of you don't even realize when your kids are triggering your past. A child asks for help climbing down a play structure, and suddenly you're furious, convinced they're just being dramatic. But it's not about them, it's about you. You remember how your parents babied you, or maybe how they ignored you, and the memory hijacks the moment. Instead of seeing a scared 7-year-old who just wants reassurance, you see a threat to your independence, your authority, your sanity. You end up punishing your kid not for what they did, but for what your parents did to you 30 years ago. And let's not sugarcoat it. Ruptures will happen. You will screw up. You'll yell, you'll withdraw, you'll act unfairly. But Perry stresses something most parents don't want to hear. It's not the rupture that ruins kids, it's the refusal to repair. Parents are so obsessed with being right or being in control that they'd rather let their kid think they're unloved than admit they overreacted. If you're too proud to apologize to a 7-year-old, you're not strong, you're fragile, and your kid is the one who pays for that fragility. One dad in Perry's stories, Mark, didn't even realize how much his unresolved childhood abandonment was poisoning his marriage and fatherhood. He thought he was just bored and resentful of family life. But what was really happening? His son's needs were reminding him of his own father walking out on him as a child. That wound was still bleeding, decades later, and it made him want to run away too. Only when he faced that grief, when he unlocked the box of pain he had avoided, could he actually connect with his son. The repair wasn't about saying sorry once, it was about rewriting the whole script of his family's future. Now here's the brutal commentary part. Most parents don't repair because they can't face the shame of admitting they were wrong. They think if they admit fault, they'll lose respect. Wrong. Kids don't respect fake perfection. They respect honesty. When you refuse to admit mistakes, you raise kids who either over-adapt to please everyone or who blow up at everyone because they never learned how to navigate conflict. So, congratulations, you didn't protect your ego. You handed your kid a blueprint for dysfunctional relationships. The ghosts in your nursery aren't the kids. They're the patterns you haven't killed. Every time you withdraw when your child needs you, every time you punish them for being too much, when really you just don't want to feel your own discomfort, you're keeping the ghosts alive. And your kids, they'll inherit them just like you did, unless you finally decide to be the adult who ends the chain. That means looking at your own childhood, not just the Instagram-worthy parts, but the ugly, neglected, shameful memories you've buried. Because if you don't deal with your baggage, your kids will be forced to carry it, and they'll resent you for it, just like you resent your parents for dumping theirs onto you. Key takeaway: you don't just pass down your genes, you pass down your unresolved trauma. Break the cycle by facing your past, owning your mistakes, and repairing with your kids before your ghosts become theirs. Favorite quote: "It is not the rupture that is so important, it is the repair that matters." The voice in their head: "Let me say something you don't want to hear. The way you talk to yourself in the bathroom mirror at 7 a.m. is the exact way your kid will talk to themselves for the rest of their life. Think about that. Every time you mutter, 'God, I look disgusting,' or sigh, 'I can't get anything right,' you're basically rehearsing lines for your child's future inner critic, that little voice that tears you apart at night when you can't sleep. You didn't invent it, you inherited it, and unless you fix it, you're passing it on like a family heirloom nobody asked for." Philippa makes it painfully clear. Children don't just absorb your parenting strategies, they absorb your mindset. If you drag yourself through life with a constant soundtrack of self-doubt, guilt, and judgment, don't be surprised when your child grows up hearing the same voice in their own head. And yet, parents still try to disguise this with cheap affirmations. You'll tell your kid, "You can be anything you want," while 5 minutes later, groaning that you're too stupid to figure out your phone's Wi-Fi settings. Guess which one sticks? Exactly, the self-loathing. Kids are allergic to hypocrisy. And here's the kicker. It's not just the way you talk to yourself. It's how you judge others and how you obsess over being labeled a good parent versus a bad one. We live in a culture addicted to these binary judgments. The good mom who packs Instagram-worthy lunches, the bad dad who forgets school pickup once. None of this is real, but you cling to it like your life depends on it. Why? Because the second you admit you're flawed, you fear you'll lose the badge of being a decent parent. So instead, you double down, pretend, and perform. Meanwhile, your kid sees right through it. They're not stupid, they know when you're insecure. And because kids don't just witness behavior, they inhale it. They grow up with the same crippling obsession about being enough. Let's stop pretending. Parents aren't obsessed with being good for their kids. They're obsessed with protecting themselves from shame. That's why most parents can't admit when they screw up. You'll never say, "I overreacted because I was tired." Instead, you'll justify it. Well, if you just listened the first time, congratulations, you just taught your kid that mistakes are dangerous and honesty is weakness. And then you wonder why they lie to you about their grades, their drinking, or their feelings. You trained them that way. Here's the brutal truth. Kids don't need a perfect parent, they need a real one. If you can't look your child in the eye and say, "I was wrong and I'm sorry," then don't be surprised when they grow into an adult who can't say the same to their boss, their partner, or their own kids. You didn't raise resilience, you raised defensiveness. And what about that inner critic you carry? The voice that says, "Don't try, you'll fail." Perry warns that it doesn't just stay inside you, it leaks out. Parents who trash talk themselves create kids who either shrink under the same self-hatred or rebel by becoming hypercritical of everyone else. You see this all the time in workplaces. The boss who's brutal on employees because they're secretly brutal on themselves. That pattern starts at home. And yes, if you're the parent who never lets yourself off the hook, you're setting your kid up for the exact same prison sentence. Now here's the uncomfortable flip side. Some parents overcompensate. They pour on praise so thick it's meaningless. You're amazing, sweetheart. You're the best artist ever. Sounds cute, but it's actually lazy. Kids don't need vague, syrupy compliments. They need specific feedback that teaches them how to value effort and reality. Saying, "I love how carefully you drew that P" is 10 times more powerful than saying, "Wow, you're a genius." Why? Because one builds identity on action, the other builds identity on a fragile pedestal. And pedestals break the second life proves you aren't the best at something. So, let's call it like it is. Your words matter more than you want to admit. Every snide comment you make about your own weight, every judgment you whisper about a neighbor, every time you obsess about being the good parent instead of the honest one, it all becomes the raw material for your child's self-talk. You are literally outsourcing your inner monologue to their future. So ask yourself this: if your child grew up with the exact same voice in their head that you hear in yours, would you be proud of that or horrified? Because the truth is, there is no escaping it. You're writing their internal script every single day. And if you don't like the sound of your own, it's your job to change it before they inherit it and think it's their own. Key takeaway: every word you speak, to yourself, to others, to your child, is a rehearsal for the voice your child will carry in their head for life. Make sure it's not a voice that destroys them. Favorite quote: "Children do what we do rather than what we say." So, if you're in the habit of beating yourself up in your head, your child is liable to adopt the same potentially damaging habit. The battle at home. Let's be honest, families don't fall apart because of whether you have one parent, two parents, divorced parents, step-parents, or parents who raise their kids in a commune with 3 dogs and a goat. The structure isn't the problem, it's the climate inside the house. It's whether the air in that home feels like oxygen or like smoke. And too many of us are raising kids in battlegrounds where the war never ends. Philippa doesn't care if your family looks like the traditional Hallmark card or the most unconventional setup imaginable. She points to the research that proves what we don't like admitting. Children thrive in all kinds of structures as long as the relationships inside are not poisoned. Your kids don't care about your marital status. They care about whether the adults they love can sit at the same table without turning dinner into the Hunger Games. And here's the brutal truth. You probably think you're hiding your arguments from your kids. You're not. They can smell tension like smoke from a mile away. You don't need to scream for them to feel it. A slammed cupboard door, a sarcastic comment, the way you roll your eyes when your partner talks. That's all it takes for them to know the war is still on. We like to think kids are resilient, but really, they're sponges. If they spend their childhood in a home where arguments mean icy silences, sarcasm, or one parent storming out, then guess what? That's the exact toolkit they'll use when they're in relationships later. You didn't just argue about who was doing the dishes, you wrote their entire future script for handling conflict. Fact tennis, martyrdom, passive-aggressive sulking, all of it gets absorbed and repeated, and then you'll look at your grown kids screaming at their spouse the same way you screamed at yours and say, "I don't know where they got that from." Newsflash, they got it from you. Perry insists arguments themselves aren't the problem. The problem is how you argue and whether you ever repair. A family where differences are acknowledged, feelings are expressed, and people actually compromise, that's not dysfunction, that's training for life. A family where arguments turn into battles of who's right and who's wrong, where nobody owns their feelings and everyone just tries to score points, that's a training camp for bitterness. And bitterness corrodes faster than any divorce paper ever could. Think about the last time you had a fight at home. Did you start sentences with "you always" or "you never"? Then you weren't trying to solve the problem, you were trying to win. Did you wait for your partner to pause so you could launch your counterattack? That wasn't listening, that was preparing ammo. Did you change the subject instead of addressing the real issue? That wasn't avoiding conflict, that was avoiding intimacy. And when you pretend intimacy doesn't exist, your kids learn the same thing: hide, distract, and disconnect whenever relationships get hard. And here's where it gets really ugly. When children grow up in homes where conflict is toxic, they don't just learn bad argument styles. They learn that love is conditional, that security is fragile, that connection can be pulled out from under them without warning. That's why so many adults can't stand vulnerability. They were raised in houses where vulnerability was punished with mockery or ignored with silence. If you want to know why your kid can't talk to you, why they shut their bedroom door or roll their eyes when you try to connect, it's not because they're teens, it's because they've learned it's safer to be defensive than to be open. And who taught them that? Look in the mirror. The truth is, kids don't need you to be perfect. They don't need a house without arguments. What they need is a battlefield where, even after the dust settles, love still wins. Where apologies are made, where vulnerability is safe, where you stop fighting to win and start fighting to understand. That's how you turn a house from a war zone into a training ground for empathy. Because the reality is, your children are not just watching how you treat them. They are watching how you treat each other. Every sigh, every raised eyebrow, every silent treatment, it all becomes the language of love they'll use later. And if you're too stubborn to admit that, you're not protecting them. You're dooming them to repeat your mistakes. Key takeaway: families don't collapse because of structure. They collapse because of hostility. Your kids don't need parents who never argue. They need parents who know how to fight fair and repair. Favorite quote: "It is not the structure of the family that matters," which is good news if you're not in a nuclear family. What matters is how we all get on. The pain that shapes us. Here's the ugly truth. Your kids are not destroyed by your mistakes, your breakups, or your imperfections. They are destroyed by how you handle them. Divorce doesn't ruin children. Silence, resentment, and bitterness do. A single-parent home doesn't screw a child up. But growing up in an environment where pain is hidden, ignored, or turned into a weapon, that scars them for life. You want proof? Look around. You know people who grew up in messy, imperfect homes but are thriving. And you know people who came from the picture-perfect family and can't hold down a relationship. The difference isn't structure, it's how suffering was handled. Philippa makes this brutally clear. She says pain is inevitable. Families separate, parents die, people fail, life crushes you sometimes. Kids will see it all. You can't protect them from that, and you shouldn't try. What matters is whether you teach them that pain is survivable, that love doesn't disappear when circumstances change, and that even in grief or anger, people can still treat each other with respect. The real trauma doesn't come from sadness, it comes from bitterness, from parents who weaponize their hurt and force the child to carry the shrapnel. Think about how many parents do this. You break up with your partner, and instead of dealing with your own grief, you hand your child the poison. Don't be like your father. Tell your mother she's late on the money again. You've just turned your kid into a messenger, a pawn in your unresolved pain, and then you pat yourself on the back because you're honest. No, you're not honest. You're selfish. You're making your child carry emotions that belong to you, and kids are not strong enough to carry them. They either crumble under the weight or they turn cold, numbing themselves so they don't have to feel. That's how generational bitterness gets passed down. And here's the thing. When children see pain handled with kindness and goodwill, they don't just survive it, they grow stronger. Perry shares how parents who admit their sadness without drowning their kids in it, parents who can say, "I'm hurting right now, but I still love you and I'll still take care of you," give their kids the single most powerful lesson in resilience. That lesson says, life will hurt, but love remains. You can feel grief and still give kindness. You can be angry without destroying the people around you. That's what makes kids safe. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of compassion inside it. But most people don't want to hear this because it requires humility. It requires you to put your ego down long enough to stop blaming your ex, your parents, your job, or life itself. Instead, people cling to their grudges like comfort blankets. And who pays the price? The kids. They grow up watching you replay the same bitterness for years, and eventually they either absorb it or run from it. Either way, the pain still shapes them. So let me be brutally clear. If your child sees you destroy your ex in every conversation, they will assume that's what love turns into when it breaks. If they watch you sulk and punish with silence instead of talking, they will assume intimacy is unsafe. And if you force them to take sides in your war, you've just taught them that relationships are battlefields, not sanctuaries. Don't kid yourself. You might think you're teaching them to be tough, but all you're doing is making sure they struggle to trust, to forgive, to ever believe that love can outlast hurt. The real courage is to show your kids how to make pain bearable, to model that you can suffer without breaking connection, that even when life goes sideways, you can choose goodwill over bitterness. That's what children need. They don't need parents who hide sadness or pretend nothing is wrong. They need parents who can face it head on, admit it, and still keep showing up. Because if you don't, they'll grow up believing that pain equals abandonment, that hurt equals hate, and they'll repeat the cycle in their own relationships. So stop pretending your kid isn't watching. Stop using them as a shield. Stop telling yourself that bitterness is honesty. You want to break the cycle? Handle your pain like an adult. Say you're sad, admit you're angry, then keep loving. Because if you can do that, your kid won't just survive. They'll learn how to face life without letting pain turn them bitter too. Key takeaway: it's not brokenness that harms children, it's bitterness. Pain is survivable. What matters is whether you model compassion and goodwill in the middle of it, or dump your baggage onto your child. Favorite quote: what is damaging for a child is if they are left alone with a parent's bitterness. If goodwill is fostered, children can thrive, even when their parents live apart. The storm of feelings. Here's the thing about feelings. They don't disappear just because you tell your kid to stop having them. Shocking, I know, but how many parents are guilty of this exact nonsense? A toddler is crying because their toy broke, and instead of acknowledging their heartbreak, you say, "Stop crying, it's not a big deal." Not a big deal. To them, it's the end of the world. You just told them their inner reality is irrelevant. Congratulations. You've planted the seed of emotional suppression that will bloom into anxiety, depression, or anger issues later. Philippa is relentless about this. Children need containment, not dismissal. And containment doesn't mean you rush in and fix everything. It doesn't mean you buy another toy or distract them with a cookie. Containment means you sit with them in the storm, you name the feelings, you let them know the chaos is real and survivable. It's the difference between saying, "You're being silly, stop it," and saying, "I can see you're really upset your toy broke, that's hard." One response builds trust, the other builds shame. The irony is, so many parents think they're being strong by telling their kid to toughen up. No, you're not making them strong. You're teaching them to bury their emotions until they explode. That's not strength, that's fragility disguised as toughness. And the adults who live this way end up either terrified of their own feelings or addicted to numbing them. You know the type. People who can't sit still without scrolling, who drink every weekend to escape, who lash out when the smallest thing goes wrong. That didn't come out of nowhere. That came from a childhood where feelings weren't contained. They were dismissed, ignored, or punished. And let's not act like this is just a kid problem. Adults still pull this same garbage with each other. Your partner says they're upset, and instead of listening, you try to fix it or minimize it. You're overreacting. It's not that bad. Just move on. Translation? Your feelings make me uncomfortable, so stop making me deal with them. That's exactly what many parents do to their kids, and it's exactly why so many people grow up emotionally illiterate. They don't know how to contain their own storms because nobody ever sat with them in one. Perry even points out the danger of parents who believe that only positive emotions are acceptable, the ones who demand smiles, who tell their child, "Be happy for grandma," when the kid is clearly sad or scared. Do you know what that teaches? That love is conditional. That in order to be accepted, you must fake your emotions. And what happens when you fake emotions long enough? You lose touch with what you're actually feeling. You stop trusting yourself. And then you wake up at 30 in a job you hate or a marriage that's killing you, and you don't even know why, because your entire emotional compass was trained to point away from your true north. But here's the twist. Kids don't drown in feelings. They drown when no one teaches them to swim in them. When a child screams, when they sulk, when they melt down in the supermarket, it's not because they're broken, it's because they're overwhelmed and don't yet have the tools to regulate. You can either add weight to their body by shaming them, or you can throw them afloat by acknowledging what they're going through. That doesn't mean giving in to every tantrum. It means translating their chaos into words they can understand. You're really angry that I said no. That makes sense. You wanted it so much, but the answer is still no. That's containment. That's teaching them emotions are survivable, not shameful. The hard truth: if you were shut down as a kid, you'll struggle to do this with your own. You'll want to repeat the same toughen up crap you were fed. But here's your wake-up call. Your discomfort with emotions is not your child's burden. Don't pass it down because you were never taught better. Learn better, model better, break the cycle. Because if you don't, you're not raising a resilient child, you're raising another adult who will need therapy to feel anything without shame. Feelings are messy, unpredictable, and inconvenient, but they're not optional. They're the language of being human. If you don't teach your child to feel, you're not raising a human, you're raising a mask. And one day, that mask will crack. Key takeaway: children don't need their feelings erased, they need them contained. If you don't teach your kids that emotions are survivable, you're setting them up to drown in adulthood. Favorite quote: children don't need rescuing from their feelings, they need help containing them. Monsters in the dark. Children are not scared of the dark because of monsters under the bed. They're scared because no one has taught them how to face fear without shame. Think about it. When a child says, "I'm scared," how often do they hear, "Don't be silly, there's nothing there," or the classic, "Big kids don't get scared"? Do you realize what you just did? You told them their fear doesn't exist, but here's the cruel twist. You didn't erase the fear, you erased their trust in you. They're still afraid, only now they're afraid alone. Philippa is surgical about this. Fear, sadness, anger, all of it are part of the emotional diet. To pretend otherwise is like telling a child they can live on candy and never need vegetables. When you tell kids they should only feel happy, you are raising emotional amputees. They'll grow up thinking sadness is weakness, fear is failure, and anger is evil. Then you wonder why adults are terrified of therapy, terrified of crying, terrified of admitting they're scared of losing their job or their marriage. It started with you telling them, "Don't be afraid of the dark." Here's the raw truth. Your kid doesn't need you to kill the monster. They need you to sit with them in the dark and prove that even with the monster present, they're not abandoned. Comfort doesn't come from pretending the danger doesn't exist. Comfort comes from, "I hear you, you're scared. I'm right here." That's it. That's the work. Containment, not denial. But we live in a culture addicted to the demand for happiness. Smile for the picture. Don't ruin the holiday with your mood. You should be grateful. Do you hear the violence in that? Gratitude at gunpoint, forced cheerfulness. You're not teaching joy, you're teaching performance. And the child learns fast. If I'm not smiling, I don't belong. If I'm not happy, I'm not lovable. They grow into adults who laugh at parties while secretly collapsing inside because they think showing sadness will drive people away. And let's be real, how many adults here are still afraid of their own inner monsters? You don't sleep with the lights on anymore, but you still dodge your fear like a child under a blanket. Afraid of failing, so you never start. Afraid of rejection, so you never ask. Afraid of being alone, so you stay in toxic relationships. The monster changed shape, but it never left. And why? Because when you were small, someone told you fear was unacceptable. And when fear isn't acceptable, it grows in the shadows. Now here's the punch. Children don't need you to delete fear. They need you to model courage. And courage isn't not being scared. Courage is being scared and showing up anyway. When you say, "I know the dark feels scary, but we're safe here together," you're teaching that fear can exist alongside safety. That emotions don't have to be exiled for life to move forward. That's a skill more useful than any math formula they'll learn in school. You know what the real monster is? Parents who demand permanent cheerfulness from their children. Parents who cannot tolerate a sulking child because it threatens their fragile sense of control. Those parents aren't raising strong kids, they're raising performers. Kids who will spend their lives smiling for others while screaming inside. And that's not parenting, That's stage managing. So stop trying to be the Ghostbuster. Stop telling your child the monster doesn't exist. Sit with them. Let them talk about it. Let them draw it. Hell, name it together. Because once it has a name, it loses its power. The goal isn't to erase fear. The goal is to teach that fear is survivable, that moodiness is survivable, that life is not about happiness on demand, but about being real without losing connection. Key takeaway: children don't crumble under fear. They crumble when fear is forbidden. It's not the monster in the dark that breaks them, it's being told they're not allowed to be afraid. Favorite quote: sometimes the scariest monster isn't under the bed, it's being told you're not allowed to feel afraid. Birth of a bond. You think parenting starts the moment the baby arrives? Wrong. Parenting starts the moment that second line appears on the pregnancy test, that heartbeat on the ultrasound. That's not just biology, that's the opening scene of the longest relationship you'll ever have. And whether you're ready or not, your child is already soaking in your world, your stress, your joy, your ambivalence. They are literally being marinated in the emotional soup you bring into the room. Philippa points out that connection doesn't begin in the delivery room. It begins the moment you acknowledge that this tiny human exists. Some parents bond instantly, others don't. And here's the uncomfortable truth: both are normal. But pretending that bonding is automatic is the lie that traps people in shame. Society sells this hallmark fantasy that you should look at your newborn and feel instant cosmic love. Guess what? Some people look at their newborn and feel nothing but exhaustion or panic or even resentment. That doesn't make you a monster, it makes you honest. The problem isn't the lack of instant bonding, it's the silence around it. When no one talks about the awkward, painful, or even absent connection, parents start thinking, something is broken in me. And shame is the fastest way to poison the bond before it's even built. Here's where Perry is blunt. Babies don't need perfect parents. They need present parents. They don't need you to perform love, they need you to practice it. Bonding is not a one-time lightning bolt, it's a slow accumulation of ordinary moments. Feeding, holding, changing, staring into those alien little eyes. Think about it. If love were only real when it struck like a thunderclap, most marriages would collapse by year 2. Love is built brick by brick through daily attention. And the same goes for parent-child bonds. But let's call out a brutal reality. A lot of parents treat babies like accessories, something to photograph, to post online, to complete the family picture. That's not bonding, that's branding. And children know when they're loved versus when they're a prop. You can't fake it. You either show up consistently or you don't. And when you don't, your kid grows up chasing approval, begging for scraps of attention, mistaking performative love for real connection. And let's talk about pregnancy, the stage where so many myths poison expectations. Hormones are brutal, moods swing, bodies change, and suddenly the person carrying the child is told to just enjoy it. Enjoy it. You're nauseous, exhausted, and terrified, but sure, slap on a smile because apparently motherhood starts with suppressing your reality. Perry demolishes that nonsense. If you're miserable during pregnancy, it doesn't mean you'll be a terrible parent. If you're euphoric, it doesn't guarantee you'll bond instantly after birth. Stop making pregnancy a moral test. It's biology, psychology, and chaos rolled into one. Here's the raw confrontation. If you don't invest in building the bond early, you're planting seeds of distance that grow into trees of resentment later. Don't think your child won't notice. Kids are emotional detectives. They feel the lack before they can ever name it. They know when you're there but not really there, and they will internalize it. Some will become hyper-independent, building walls before they can walk. Others will become clingy, desperate for the connection that should have been theirs by default. Either way, the bond, or lack of it, writes the script for their entire emotional life. And yet, there's hope. Repair is always possible. Maybe you didn't feel bonded at birth. Maybe you messed up the early years. That doesn't mean the thread is cut forever. Connection is not a one-time opportunity. It's a practice. You can start now. Look your child in the eyes, even if they're 3 or 30. Show them you see them. Say the words you wish you'd said earlier. Sit with them without distraction. It's never too late to start weaving the bond. You want the truth? Kids don't remember what you bought them, or the cute nursery theme, or whether you had a gender reveal party. They remember the feeling of being held, of being seen, of knowing they mattered enough for you to pay attention. Bonding isn't about the big gestures, it's about 1,000 micro moments of presence. Screw that up, and no toy in the world will fix it. Nail it, and your child has a foundation that can weather almost anything life throws their way. Key takeaway: love doesn't magically appear at birth. It's built in the ordinary, messy daily moments of showing up. The bond isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Favorite quote: connection doesn't start after birth, it begins the moment they exist. The motherload. Alright, let's get into the raw, unfiltered mess of what it actually means when a baby arrives and a parent is born at the same time. Forget the Instagram perfect photos of moms in white dresses with smiling newborns. This isn't a soft focus Pampers commercial, it's a demolition and reconstruction of a human being. And the cost isn't just sleepless nights, it's identity, hormones, sanity, and sometimes the terrifying whisper, "Did I make a mistake?" Philippa doesn't sugarcoat it. Becoming a parent isn't just about the baby being born, it's about the parent being reborn. Your body, your mind, your relationships, they don't stay intact, they get dismantled and rearranged. Postnatal depression, hormonal earthquakes, and suffocating loneliness aren't malfunctions. They're predictable outcomes when society throws parents into the deep end and says, "Figure it out," and then of course has the audacity to judge you when you start to drown. Here's where we need to slap reality across the face. Parenthood is often sold as the ultimate fulfillment of human life, the completion of your family, the missing piece of your identity, the thing that will finally make you happy. What a con. The truth is, nothing in your life will expose your cracks faster than parenting. If you thought your relationship was strong, wait until you haven't slept in 6 weeks and one of you says the wrong thing about bottle feeding. If you thought you were patient, wait until your baby won't stop crying at 3 a.m. and you realize you've Googled, "Can I give newborn Benadryl?" more than once. Parenthood isn't completion, it's confrontation. Perry brings up the sympathetic magic parents often get trapped in, the superstition that you must feel constant joy, or else you'll curse your child's future. Mothers especially get crushed by this. You're told to bond instantly, to glow, to cherish every moment, and if you don't, shame. But here's the kicker: pretending to be fine when you're not doesn't protect your child, it isolates you from them. Children don't need a parent who never suffers. They need a parent who can admit suffering without drowning in it. Now, let's really cut deep. Loneliness. No one talks enough about the brutal isolation of becoming a parent. You're suddenly housebound, friends drift away, your partner might not understand what you're going through, and the world just shrugs like, "This is normal." No, it's not normal. It's cruel. Communities that once raised the children together have been replaced with nuclear families, where 2 adults are expected to do the work of a village while still paying the bills. No wonder parents collapse. The hidden cost of parenting isn't just diapers and formula, it's the erosion of your mental health in a culture that treats vulnerability like weakness. Hormones, of course, are the accelerant on all of this. Perry points out how radically they shift not only moods, but identity itself. Your brain changes, your sense of self changes. Some parents feel alien in their own bodies, others feel alien in their own minds. The tragedy isn't the hormones, it's how little we prepare people for the reality that parenthood rewires you. Instead of education and empathy, we offer cliches. It's all worth it in the end. Is it worth it? Probably. But that doesn't erase the abyss you might have to crawl through to get there. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. Pretending parenthood is only joy cheats both the parent and the child. When you deny the pain, you deny yourself compassion, and you deny your child the model of how to endure suffering without collapsing. Kids don't just need to see you happy, they need to see you survive unhappiness. Because one day they'll face their own storms, and if all you gave them was the illusion of constant sunshine, they'll have no idea how to navigate darkness. Let's be blunt, having a child breaks you, but it also rebuilds you, and the real courage isn't in avoiding the cracks, it's in letting the cracks show and teaching your child that imperfection is survivable. You don't become less of a person when parenthood strips you bare. You become more because the pieces that remain are tested, chosen, and fought for. Key takeaway: parenthood isn't just about a baby being born, it's about a parent being dismantled and rebuilt. The pain, the hormones, the loneliness, they aren't failures, they're part of the rebirth. And the most important gift you can give your child isn't a perfect version of you, but a real one. Favorite quote: no one prepares you for the rebirth of the parent alongside the child. The first language. Alright, let's rip the band-aid off. Before your child ever learns to say mama or dada, you've already been teaching them how to speak. Not with words, but with every raised eyebrow, every delayed glance at your phone, every sigh when they reach for you. You think babies are blank slates? Wrong. They're recorders, and they start taping from day one. Before language arrives, you've already written the software that will run in their heads for the rest of their lives. Philippa dives into this in a way that should make every parent uncomfortable. The first language isn't verbal, it's relational. It's the pauses, the turn-taking, the way you look at your child when they babble nonsense. Do you light up like they've just solved world hunger? Or do you half smile while scrolling TikTok? Babies can't speak, but they damn well can read you. And that's the kicker. Before they learn words, they learn whether communication is worth it. If you don't respond to their gaze, their coos, their reaching hands, you're basically teaching them, talking doesn't matter, being heard doesn't matter. And then we wonder why some adults can't communicate their feelings without shutting down or exploding. They weren't taught that their voice was worth listening to in the first place. Now let's confront the ugly truth. Modern parenting is hijacked by distraction. It's not that we don't love our kids, it's that we've built a society that demands we give half of ourselves to everything. Work is in our pockets. Notifications buzz louder than our child's giggles. Dinner gets wolfed down while emails pile up. So what do our kids see? They see us watching screens more than we watch them. And they don't say, wow, mom must have an important deadline. They say, I must not be as important as whatever's on that glowing rectangle. And you can tell yourself they don't notice, but they do. They notice everything. Perry points out how important turn-taking is, what psychologists call serve and return. Baby coos, you coo back. Baby giggles, you laugh with them. Baby points, you look where they're pointing. This back and forth doesn't just build language, it builds identity. It's how kids learn. I exist, and when I reach out, the world reaches back. Ignore enough of those moments, and they stop reaching out. That's not personality, that's resignation. But here's the confrontational bit. This isn't just about parenting, it's about the way we, as adults, treat each other. When your partner tells you something vulnerable, do you stop and listen, or do you half listen while mentally composing your reply? When your friend texts you something meaningful, do you double tap with a heart and move on, or do you actually engage? The language of connection isn't words, it's attention, and most of us are fluent in neglect. No wonder so many adults feel unseen, unheard, and unloved. They grew up rehearsing invisibility. Here's what Perry does brilliantly. She strips away the myth that kids only start learning when school begins. No. They're learning in every microsecond. And the biggest lesson they'll ever absorb is whether or not the people they love find them worth listening to. That lesson will shape their confidence, their ability to form relationships, their resilience in life. And it's terrifying because it's not about what you say, it's about whether you're actually present enough to respond. Think about this. If every look, every gesture, every moment of eye contact is shaping your child's first language, then you're either building a dictionary of connection or a dictionary of silence. And don't fool yourself. Kids grow fluent in whatever language you give them. You ignore their bids for connection now. They'll stop offering them later. And then when they're teenagers and don't tell you anything, you'll wonder, why won't they talk to me? The answer? They did once. You didn't answer. Key takeaway. Communication starts long before words. Every response or lack of response teaches a child whether their voice matters. If you're too distracted to notice the little bids for connection now, don't be surprised when the silence becomes permanent later. Favorite quote, every smile, every pause, every gaze. It's all conversation before language arrives. The digital divide. Let's be honest, your phone is raising your kid more than you are. And before you roll your eyes, think about it. How many times today have you shushed a child while answering an email? How many times have you told yourself, I'll just check this one notification, while your kid was trying to show you the drawing they made? That's not multitasking, that's neglect dressed up as productivity. And the tragedy is, your kid doesn't interpret it as, mom's busy. They interpret it as, I'm not worth looking at. That is the digital divide. Not the gap between tech-savvy parents and their kids, but the gap between being physically present and emotionally absent. Philippa doesn't sugarcoat this. Children are people too. They're not props in your busy adult life. They're not accessories for your Instagram feed, and they're not a nuisance that needs silencing so you can scroll in peace. They're whole human beings whose sense of worth is being sculpted in real time by your attention, or your lack of it. And every single time you look at your phone instead of them, you're teaching them something. You're teaching them that connection is negotiable, that intimacy can be postponed, that presence can be substituted with a screen. And then we sit around wondering why kids grow up anxious, disconnected, addicted to their own screens. Well, where do you think they learned it? They've been watching you rehearse the script for years. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't outsource eye contact. You can't outsource the tiny moments of dialogue that happen in silence, in a smile, in a shared glance. Perry highlights the way children depend on dialogue to grow, not just verbal dialogue, but emotional responsiveness. And if every pause in conversation is filled by you refreshing your feed, you're leaving your child talking to a wall. Worse, you're teaching them that talking to a wall is normal. That's not just bad parenting, that's emotional vandalism. The scary part is this: most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We convince ourselves that we're always there for our kids because we're in the same room. But being in the same room while mentally scrolling through 50 other people's curated lives isn't presence, it's absence with good Wi-Fi. Children don't need your body in the room, they need your mind in the room. They need your eyes, your laughter, your gasps when they tell a story that makes no sense but means the world to them. And here's the kicker. When we replace our children's real-time bids for attention with digital noise, we're not just neglecting them, we're training them to seek validation elsewhere. Maybe it's their own devices, maybe it's peers, maybe it's toxic relationships later on. But make no mistake, if they don't get "I see you" at home, they'll hunt for it in places that might destroy them. You don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. Perry also brings up how our own discomfort with dialogue plays into this. Some parents avoid tough conversations, afraid of awkwardness or conflict. But guess what? Avoidance isn't neutral, it's a lesson. When you don't talk, you're teaching them silence is safer than honesty. And kids internalize that fast. They learn not to ask questions. They learn not to express pain. They learn to smile when they're breaking inside, because that's the model they were given. So here's the confrontation. If you want your kid to grow up as a person who can connect, who can have real conversations, who can feel seen and heard, you need to put the damn phone down. You need to answer their half-formed sentences like they're the most important words you'll ever hear. Because to your child, they are. You think you'll remember the post you scrolled past yesterday? No, you won't. But your kid will remember that you didn't look up when they called your name. Key takeaway: every glance at your phone is a glance your child doesn't get. You're not just missing moments, you're teaching them how much or how little they matter. Favorite quote: every glance at your phone is a glance your child doesn't get. Sleep, play, survival. Let's stop pretending kids are complicated. They're not. They're actually ridiculously simple. They need three things: sleep, play, and a sense that when life inevitably knocks them down, they won't be rescued by a frantic helicopter parent, but supported by someone who trusts them enough to try again. That's it. Not Baby Einstein DVDs, not overpriced Montessori gadgets, not that Himalayan salt lamp you bought because a TikTok told you it calms the nervous system. They need the basics. But here's the punchline. Most adults screw up those basics because they're too busy overcomplicating everything. Philippa calls it like it is. Without sleep, your child's brain is basically running on Windows 95, laggy, glitchy, and ready to shut down at any second. Yet how many parents fight their kids about bedtime every single night, like it's some kind of Olympic sport? You want to know why your kid melts down in the grocery store aisle? It's not the candy, it's the fact that they're chronically sleep deprived because you didn't have the backbone to enforce bedtime. And let's not pretend you're guiltless either. How often do you doom scroll at 1 a.m. and then wonder why you're snapping at everyone the next day? If adults turn into monsters without sleep, what chance does a 5-year-old have? And then there's play. We've managed to sterilize the very thing that makes kids thrive. Instead of letting them run wild, scrape knees, and argue over who gets to be the dragon, parents now schedule structured play dates like their toddlers are applying for Harvard. That's not play, that's networking in diapers. Play is messy, play is chaos. Play is where kids test limits, build resilience, and learn to navigate other people without you narrating their every move. Perry makes it painfully obvious. If you rob your child of unstructured play, you're robbing them of the ability to figure life out when you're not around. And that's the point of parenting, isn't it? To prepare them for the day you're not there. Or do you want them to be 27, crying because no one's around to solve their roommate drama? Now let's talk about helping versus rescuing. And here's where most parents get it dead wrong. You see your kids struggle with homework, you swoop in, they fall on the playground, you scoop them up before they've even processed what happened. You're not helping them, you're teaching them they're incapable. Perry draws a brutal but necessary line here. Supporting a child is not the same as shielding them from reality. Helping means holding space for their frustration, encouraging them to try again, and being present while they learn grit. Rescuing, on the other hand, is about soothing your own anxiety so you don't have to watch them fail. Guess who that benefits? You, not them. Here's the uncomfortable truth you don't want to face. Most kids today don't need more therapy. They don't need more diagnoses. They need sleep. They need play. They need to feel the sting of failure and know that it won't kill them. If you give them those 3 things, you've already built half their mental health toolkit. But no, we're too busy optimizing childhood with apps and tutoring sessions to remember that the strongest foundation is the simplest one. So here's your confrontation. Stop looking for hacks. Stop outsourcing your child's well-being to apps, books, and self-proclaimed parenting gurus on Instagram. The human brain has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years on the same principles: rest, resilience, and connection through play. You want a balanced, grounded kid? Then stop sabotaging them with your own chaos. Put them to bed, let them play, and for God's sake, let them figure out how to get back up when they fall. Key takeaway: kids don't need you to engineer their childhood into some picture-perfect performance. They need sleep, they need play, and they need to know that you trust them enough to fail without rescuing them every time. Favorite quote: children don't just need therapy, they need bedtime stories and playtime battles. The code behind behavior. You ever notice how adults will say, "I just don't get why my kid acts like this," while their kid is literally screaming the answer in front of them? Because here's the brutal truth. Every tantrum, every slammed door, every dramatic flop onto the floor in the middle of Target is not random chaos. It's a damn telegram, it's communication. And the only reason you don't get the message is because you're too busy labeling it as bad behavior instead of translating what it means. Children don't have the vocabulary to stand up and say, "Excuse me, mother, I'm feeling overwhelmed by unmet needs and dysregulated emotions." No, they throw the Paw Patrol toy and shriek like it's the end of the world. But guess what? That is the message. Philippa Perry makes it painfully clear. When a kid acts out, they're not plotting to ruin your day. They're expressing something their words can't. And yet, what do most parents do? They double down with explanations. You can't scream because it's not polite. You can't hit your sister because it's wrong. You think you're teaching, but all the child hears is, "Don't feel what you're feeling." It's like someone telling you not to cry at your best friend's funeral because it makes people uncomfortable. Do you stop crying? No, you feel even more misunderstood. Kids are no different. Here's where the confrontation comes in. Most adults are so allergic to raw emotions that instead of decoding behavior, they rush to shut it down. A tantrum in a supermarket? Drag the kid out, backtalk, slam the punishment down. But if all behavior is communication, then punishing without listening is like hanging up the phone mid-sentence. You're not raising a child, you're raising someone who will grow up to either repress everything until they implode or explode every time life doesn't go their way. Either option sucks, and let's not pretend this doesn't carry over into adulthood. You ever met someone who throws passive-aggressive comments instead of just saying they're hurt, or someone who drinks, ghosts people, or sabotages their own job because they can't deal? That's what happens when a kid's communication was ignored or punished instead of understood. Congratulations, you've just raised another emotionally constipated adult to send out into the world. Now, here's the twist Perry gives us. Helping a child doesn't mean fixing the behavior, it means putting their feelings into words for them. You're angry because your brother grabbed your toy. You're frustrated because I said no to more screen time. Notice the difference? You're not excusing the action, you're acknowledging the emotion underneath it, and when a child feels seen, the intensity drops. Because half the battle isn't the toy or the candy or the bedtime, it's the desperate need for someone to actually get it. But let's get uncomfortable again. Why don't parents do this? Because it requires slowing down, and slowing down means facing your own emotions. If your kid's tantrum makes you furious, that's not about them. It's about you not being able to tolerate your own anger. If their sadness makes you anxious, it's probably because no one ever validated your sadness growing up. And so you repeat the cycle, shutting them down because someone once shut you down. Brutal, right? But that's the mirror parenting holds up. So here's the real work. Stop reacting to the noise and start listening to the signal. A slammed door might mean, I feel powerless. A tantrum might mean, I feel out of control. Even silence is communication. Ignoring that because it's inconvenient to you is like covering your ears and pretending the fire alarm isn't blaring. The alarm doesn't stop just because you don't like the sound. Let's be blunt, your kid doesn't need you to be perfect, but they do need you to pay attention. Every outburst is a message wrapped in chaos. The only question is, are you brave enough to actually hear it? Or are you going to keep pretending they're just being difficult while you set them up for a lifetime of emotional illiteracy? Key takeaway: every behavior is communication. If you punish or dismiss without decoding it, you're not solving anything. You're just silencing a message that will come back louder later. Favorite quote: the question isn't why are they acting out, but what are they trying to say? Boundaries build love. You want to know why so many kids grow up to be pushovers or tyrants? Because their parents either built walls too high or didn't build any at all. And let's be brutally honest, most adults confuse boundaries with punishment. You think yelling "because I said so" is a boundary? No, that's just lazy authority flexing. A boundary isn't about controlling your kid, it's about showing them where you end and where they begin. And if you can't do that, don't be surprised when your child either steamrolls over people or gets steamrolled themselves. Philippa Perry slices through the nonsense here. The real job isn't deciding how strict to be, it's deciding how authentic you're willing to be. A boundary isn't, you can't do that because I don't like it. A boundary is, this is who I am, this is what I can handle, and this is where I stop. And the irony is, the moment you stop being performative with rules, your kid actually respects you more. Because here's the truth, children push against walls not to break them, but to check if they're real. When the wall crumbles, they panic. When the wall holds, they feel safe. That's why kids will test you to your last nerve. Not because they hate you, but because they want to know you're not a fraud. Now let's get uncomfortably real. If your idea of parenting is either total freedom or my house, my rules, you've already failed. Total freedom raises kids who think the world owes them. Total control raises kids who either rebel like hell or shrink into people pleasers. Both options breed resentment. Boundaries, real ones, do something far more powerful. They teach respect. Not fake respect, the kind where you obey because you're scared, but the kind that comes from knowing where people stand. Think about teenagers here. Parents love to complain that teenagers are difficult. Newsflash, they're not difficult, they're desperate for autonomy. But instead of giving them boundaries that respect their growing independence, parents either clamp down harder or let go entirely. Perry points out that setting limits with teenagers isn't about dictating their every move. It's about defining yourself clearly enough that they know who they're negotiating with. If you can't say, this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not, then don't act shocked when your kid treats you like background noise. But here's the punch to the gut. Most parents can't set boundaries because they don't have them in their own lives. If you let your boss walk all over you, if you let your partner guilt trip you into silence, if you say yes when you mean hell no, what lesson do you think your kid is absorbing? They're not going to follow what you say, they're going to follow what you model. And if what you model is spinelessness, don't expect strength. If what you model is control freak tyranny, don't expect empathy. And this is where the hypocrisy gets ugly. Parents love to whine, my kid doesn't respect me. But respect is earned, not demanded. If you only show up with punishments, you're teaching fear, not respect. If you show up with no limits, you're teaching entitlement. The sweet spot, the hard, uncomfortable middle ground, is holding your ground without crushing theirs. That's the architecture of love. Clear walls that aren't prison bars, but signposts saying, here's where I stand, and I'll respect where you stand too. So let's stop sugarcoating it. If you don't set boundaries, you're not easygoing, you're irresponsible. If you set boundaries just to dominate, you're not in control, you're insecure. The real courage? Saying no when you mean no, yes when you mean yes, and actually meaning it. And here's the kicker, your kids will fight you, test you, rage against you. But deep down, they'll love you for it, because nothing is scarier to a child than a parent who can't be trusted to hold the line. Key takeaway, limits aren't punishments, they're the architecture of respect. If you don't define yourself, your kids won't know where you end and where they begin. Boundaries aren't about control, they're about honesty. Favorite quote, children push against walls not to break them, but to make sure they're real. When they're grown. You think parenting ends when your kid turns 18? Cute. That's like thinking your job is done once you plant a seed. No. The real work starts when that seed grows into something with opinions, bad tattoos, and a Spotify playlist that makes your ears bleed. Parenting doesn't stop when the child becomes an adult. It just mutates. And here's the hard truth. A lot of parents absolutely butcher this stage. They either keep smothering like their kid is still in diapers, or they detach entirely and act like they've been relieved of duty. Both approaches are cowardly. Philippa Perry makes it very clear. The job doesn't end, it evolves. Teenagers, young adults, even grown kids don't need you as a dictator or a ghost. They need you as a guide, a mirror, a person who actually sees them as an individual. But here's where most parents fail. They cling to their authority long past its expiration date. They think respect is something their kids should keep handing over, no matter how irrelevant or outdated their parenting has become. And that's why so many family dinners feel like war zones or ice-cold silences. Parents refuse to update their role. You know what adulthood feels like for most kids? It feels like trying to stand on your own 2 feet while your parents either kick the crotch out from under you or grab your arm like you're still learning to walk. One suffocates, the other abandons, and both are rooted in the same selfishness, a parent who never made peace with their shifting identity. Because here's the ugly truth, your child growing up forces you to grow up too, and if you resist, you end up being that parent who still calls their 25-year-old my baby while also criticizing every adult decision they make. The book doesn't sugarcoat it. Treating your adult child like an actual adult is an act of respect. That means you don't bulldoze their choices, you don't cling to their mistakes like a victory lap, and you don't weaponize the past to guilt them into obedience. You shift into friendship. But not the fake buddy-buddy friendship where you try to dress like them and use their slang. You will look ridiculous. The friendship of equals, the kind where you can say, I trust you with your life, even if I don't always agree with it. And if you're thinking, well, they still need my wisdom, ask yourself, is it wisdom or control dressed up in nicer words? Wisdom is offered, not shoved down someone's throat. Control is disguised as, just trying to help. And kids, even adult ones, can smell the difference a mile away. So here's the confrontation. Stop thinking your child owes you eternal obedience because you paid for piano lessons in 2005. They don't. The scoreboard resets when they grow up. The only currency that matters now is respect. And respect is earned, not demanded. If you want an adult relationship with your kids, you have to show up as an adult yourself. And let's not ignore the flip side. A lot of adult children carry decades of unresolved resentment and use that as an excuse to treat their parents like garbage. Newsflash, that's not maturity either. You don't heal by punishing back. You heal by setting boundaries, by deciding what kind of relationship you're willing to maintain. Because yes, even adult kids need boundaries with their parents. And when both sides hold the line respectfully, something incredible happens. Parenting transforms into partnership. The irony is beautiful. The end of childhood isn't the end of parenting, it's the chance for the best version of it. But that requires humility from the parent and responsibility from the child. It's a graduation for both of you. Key takeaway: parenting never ends, it just changes shape. You don't get to retire, you get to evolve. Treat your grown kids like adults or lose them entirely. Favorite quote: the end of childhood isn't the end of parenting, it's the beginning of friendship. Conclusion. Alright, let's land this plane, but not gently, because nothing about this has been gentle. If you've stuck with me through this breakdown, then you already know. This isn't just a book about parenting, it's a book about breaking generational curses, about refusing to keep passing down the same emotional hand-me-downs that never fit anyone in the first place. We started with ghosts, the unresolved wounds of your own childhood, still rattling their chains in your present, whispering into how you raise your own kids. Then we moved through the battlefield of family conflict, the storm of feelings, the monsters in the dark, the digital theft of connection, and into the terrifying truth that parenting doesn't ever end. Every chapter punched home one brutal reality. Your kids don't just listen to what you say, they become it. They don't just see how you handle love, pain, arguments, or fear. They internalize it, tattoo it into their nervous system, and carry it forward into every relationship they'll ever have. That's the weight of the job. And here's the kicker, the book is right, but it's also incomplete without you taking a hard look in the mirror. Because you can binge 100 parenting guides, but if you can't face your own bullshit, your knee-jerk reactions, your ego, your addiction to control, then you're just stockpiling wisdom you'll never use. Parenting isn't a manual you memorize, it's a mirror you stare into until you're uncomfortable enough to change. What Philippa Perry gave us in the book you wish your parents had read isn't just advice, it's an invitation. An invitation to stop being lazy with your emotions, to stop outsourcing responsibility to how you were raised, to stop pretending kids bounce back just because you told them to. It's a call to arms for self-awareness. And that's why this isn't just a parenting book, it's a human book, because every single one of us is someone's child, and every single one of us is either breaking a cycle or feeding one. So, here's the final confrontation. You've got two choices. You either let autopilot win, raise kids who spend decades in therapy undoing your mistakes, or you do the work now. Face the ghosts, change your language, learn to fight clean, contain the storms, put down the damn phone, and step into adulthood alongside them. One path leads to estrangement, resentment, and I never want to end up like my parents. The other path leads to respect, connection, and the rare gift of raising kids who actually like you when they no longer have to. Which one are you choosing? Because let's be honest, you don't get do-overs with childhood. You get one shot, and it's happening right now. Final takeaway, parenting isn't about control, it's about connection. It's not about perfection, it's about repair. And it never ends, it only transforms. If this book rattled you, good. That means it's working. But don't take my word for it. Go grab a copy of the book you wish your parents had read by Philippa Perry. Read it, wrestle with it, argue with it, and most importantly, apply it. Your kids will thank you. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, But someday, when they look back and realize you gave them something priceless, the chance to grow up without carrying the weight of your unfinished battles. And if you're watching this right now thinking, I wish my parents had read it, welcome to the club. That's the whole point. You can break the cycle, but only if you start. So if you found value in this breakdown, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with the one parent in your life who desperately needs to hear it. And remember, your childhood might not have been your fault, but raising the next generation sure as hell is your responsibility. Now go do something about it.